Hello, welcome to Understanding A Course in Miracles and to a new series which I'm calling Once Upon a Dream. A Course in Miracles is a spiritual text that some people have great difficulty in understanding. It's a mix of psychology and spirituality, in other words, transpersonal psychology, and it also uses Christian terminology. So it alleviates some of this confusion, and as our human minds tend to think in terms of stories, I'm going to give an overview of the themes of A Course in Miracles using the structure of children's stories. And in this first episode, we're going to look at the themes of the Course through the lens of the story of The Wizard of Oz. And I think that The Wizard of Oz is a really great allegory or metaphor for the themes of A Course in Miracles. So the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was written by L. Frank Baum and published in the year 1900. Now, I read that book many times when I was 8 years old, but that was a very, very long time ago, so my memory of it is somewhat hazy. I seem to remember it was different to the movie and had a lot more going on. For example, Dorothy's adventures in Oz weren't just a dream, and they're presented to the reader as having really happened. However, most of us are familiar with the 1939 movie starring Judy Garland, and as the storyline of that movie follows quite a simple formula, I think it's perfect for explaining some of the themes of the course. Dorothy in A Wizard of Oz represents the lost mind, the part of ourselves that doesn't know our light, that doesn't know our power, or our divine intelligence, our fearlessness, and our capacity to love. The lost mind or consciousness feels separated from God, separated from home, and separated from everything and everyone, always looking for happiness outside of itself, somewhere else, someplace else, in someone else. Happiness is always out of reach, always over the rainbow, where the pot of gold is waiting. However, all is not completely lost. In A Course in Miracles, our guide is the Holy Spirit, our inner teacher, also described as our own shared right mind, our conscience, our inner eternal wisdom. And in the Course, the figure of Jesus is presented to us as one of many manifestations of the Holy Spirit who help to guide us on our way home. In the movie, this figure can be symbolized by Glinda, the Good Witch of the North. Glinda doesn't always step in, and her aim isn't to take Dorothy's fear away from her. Dorothy has to learn her own lessons, but she's always there as a guide. In the Course, Jesus plays a similar role for us. But the Holy Spirit figure is always present, whether or not we're aware or whether we can hear their guidance. In the movie, Dorothy's adventures in Oz, as we said earlier, are presented as a dream. In dream analysis, particularly in the Carl Jung tradition, all the people we see in our dreams represent parts or aspects of ourselves, symbols of our own personality traits and life themes. Dorothy doesn't know how fearless she really is, so this theme comes to her in the dream in the form of the cowardly lion, who hides his fear by being intimidating to mask how terrified he always is. And this is a classic ego trait. And Dorothy doesn't know how wise she is. So this part of herself is presented in the dream as the scarecrow who thinks he's stupid because his head is made of straw and he doesn't have a brain. But the scarecrow is very intelligent. He just doesn't recognize how intelligent he is. And we can see this, for example, in our lives when we have imposter syndrome, when we feel like we're not good enough, or when we compare ourselves harshly with others. Dorothy doesn't know how loving she is. So this part of herself is presented in the dream as a tin man who thinks he's unable to love because he doesn't have a physical heart. So this brings us to another one of the main themes of A Course in Miracles. The workbook is constantly telling us that we are not our physical bodies and we're not defined by them. Wisdom doesn't come from the physical brain. The capacity to love doesn't come from the physical heart. Consciousness doesn't come from the body. True vision doesn't come from the body's eyes, and so on. So we see this theme particularly with the characters of the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, who are missing body parts and who feel incomplete, but who in fact are complete. One of the disguises that the ego takes on is that of the intimidator. There are 3 different intimidators in this movie. We already talked about the cowardly lion that masks his terror by being a bully and frightening others first before they can perceive his fear. The Wicked Witch of the West is the scary villain of this piece, but she also represents the vulnerability of the ego. All it takes is a splash of water for her to disintegrate. The famous cry of, "I'm melting," is the cry of the ego as it attempts to cling on to survival. This differs a bit from the Course though, because we're told that the ego isn't supposed to be vanquished, but relinquished. The third disguise of the ego is the illusion of power, and this is represented by the actual Wizard of Oz, who isn't actually a wizard. "I am Oz, the great and terrible," says the wizard, when really he's just a grifter. "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain," he says, when he's about to get caught out. In A Course in Miracles, the ego is presented as the trickster behind the curtain, a deceiver, a grifter, all mouth and no substance. This brings to mind a passage in the Course about the definition of the ego from the clarification or use of terms. What is the ego? What a dream of what you really are. A thought you are apart from your creator, and a wish to be what he created not. It is a thing of madness, not reality at all. A name for namelessness is all it is. A symbol of impossibility, a choice for options that do not exist. We call it that to help us understand. It is nothing but an ancient thought that what is made has immortality. But what could come of this except a dream, which, like all dreams, could only die? What is the ego? Nothingness, but in a form that seems like something. In a world of form, the ego cannot be denied, for it alone seems real. Kansas in the movie represents home. Home represents heaven in the Course. Infinity, absolute reality. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus tells us that we are our own key to getting home, because we are the prison, we are the prisoner, and we are the prison warden. Similarly, in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is her own key to getting home. She didn't even need those ruby slippers. All she had to do was wake up and she was back home. And all she had to do to go back home was to realize that there's no place like home and that there is nowhere else but home. In A Course in Miracles, we're also told that home is with God, and what we have to do is awaken. And to awaken, we have to see the face of Christ in everyone we meet and recognize that everyone is an aspect of the one self, the one Christ, even if we're dreaming that we're only human. We also, like Dorothy, have to realize that there's no place like home, and home, or heaven, the Course says, simply means an awareness of your oneness with God and with all that is and with all that lives. I'd like to conclude with a couple of excerpts from the Course. We have begun the journey Long ago the end was written in the stars and set into the heavens with a shining ray that held it safe within eternity and through all time as well, and holds it still, unchanged, unchanging, and unchangeable. Be not afraid. We only start again an ancient journey long ago begun, that but seems new. We have begun again upon a road we travelled on before, the yellow brick road, in our analogy. And we lost our way a little while, and now we try again. The teacher of God is now at the point in his progress at which he sees in it his whole way out. He has not yet come as far as he thinks, yet when he is ready to go on, he goes with mighty companions beside him.